Hi again. In The Hard Sayings of Paul by Manfred Brauch, we're in chapter 2. One man's sin means my death? And here is Brauch's text, Romans 5 verse 12. Sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin. Why should the sin of the first human being become the downfall of the entire race? Why should all subsequent human beings stand under God's judgment against a basic sinfulness for which none of us is ultimately responsible? How, in the face of such claims, are we to believe that God is just? These and other problems arise out of this text that has provided the basis for commonly held doctrines about the nature of the human predicament. But many such questions are the result of improper interpretations or misunderstandings of the text. The word sin and its synonym, trespass, is the key word in Romans 5:12, as well as in Paul's description of the human condition in the first 3 chapters of this epistle. What does Paul mean by that term? What is his understanding of the origin of the human situation, which he describes with this term? Paul's understanding of human sinfulness is expressed in 2 phrases. One, they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God. That's Romans 1:28. And 2, you rely on the law and brag about your relationship to God. That's Romans 2:17. Sin is seen as refusal to accept our creatureliness, to acknowledge our dependence on our Maker, to recognize our limitations. We are sinners does not mean, primarily, that we have moral problems, but that in the deepest and final sense, we are severed from relationship with God because of refusal or bragging. Sin is not a thing, nor is sin a genetic defect. The idea that sin is passed on genetically, and thereby becomes the property of each individual through heredity, ultimately led to a low view of sex. Sex is seen as the prime locus of human sinfulness, to be tolerated for the purpose of procreation, but not as a part of God's economy for human wholeness and fulfillment. Nor is sin a perverted inner nature. The problem with this understanding of sin is that it divides the individual into a number of separate boxes. It arises from the idea that the fall resulted in the perversion of one essential part of ourselves. A number of candidates have been proposed. For some, the perverted part is the will. For others, it is the emotions or passions. For still others, it is reason. The pervasive mood of anti-intellectualism in some circles of Christians is traceable to such an understanding. Since the mind was affected by the fall, our reasoning capacity is perverted and depraved, and the quest of the mind cannot be trusted. But such a view does not do justice to all the biblical data. As total persons, we are fallen and stand under the judgment of God. Both our heads and hearts stand under the signature of death. Both are dust. From the biblical point of view, the term sin designates a particular kind of relationship between the creature and the Creator. And a relationship cannot be inherited. It can only be established or destroyed, affirmed or denied. Sin is thus a relational reality. We are sinners insofar as we are unrelated to God. The questions raised by that statement are, why are we that? Why is that our condition? Why do we find ourselves in such a dilemma? Paul's answer to such questions is found in Romans 5:12-13. Our text has traditionally been seen as the biblical foundation for the Christian doctrine of original sin. We all stand under the fall of first man. That is why we are in the mess we are in, is a rough paraphrase of that doctrine of original sin. But this view is inadequate, for Paul does not say that we sin because Adam sinned. He does not say that we die because Adam sinned. What he does say is this: sin, alienation from God, entered the stage of history in the first man's rebellion. Sin entered the world through one man. The result of that separation is disintegration and death. But the universal penetration of that condition is due to the fact that all persons have sinned. All persons have become revolutionaries against God because all sinned. There is a two-sided perspective here in Paul, which must be taken seriously if we wish to understand him adequately. On the one side of this dual perspective is the Hebrew idea of human solidarity, the recognition that each individual shares in a common humanity. On the other side is the recognition of individual responsibility. By virtue of the former, we are in bondage. By virtue of the latter, we become responsible for participation in that bondage. Let us look at that duality in more detail. Human solidarity. Paul was heir to a tradition concerning the human condition which was deeply rooted in Jewish beliefs. That tradition recognized the intimate interdependence of individuals and the effect that such solidarity could have, both positively and negatively. The Old Testament concept that the sins of parents would have their effect down through several generations reflects the Hebrew idea of corporate solidarity. The immediate background for Paul's statements concerning the relation between first man and the rest of humankind can be clearly seen in a Jewish work of the 1st century A.D. And we keep in mind here that he's not saying that this Jewish work is either scripture or that it is therefore normative for Christianity, just that it's the climate in which the New Testament documents were written. What did Jews of that day believe about solidarity and sin? And this document is, by the way, 2nd Esdras. Here's a quote from it. Adam transgressed, thou didst appoint death for him and for his descendants. For the first Adam, burdened with an evil heart, transgressed and was overcome, as were also all who were descended from him. Thus the disease became permanent. That's 2nd Esdras 3:7 and 21:22. I'll put in links to these in the description in case you want to look them up. And another quote from 2nd Esdras, this time chapter 7, verse 118. O Adam, what have you done? For though it was you who sinned, the fall was not yours alone, but ours also, who are your descendants. Then Brauch comments, Paul clearly reflects this Jewish understanding in Romans 5:12 and 13. Adam, the typical representative, first human being, yields to the temptation to determine his own existence and his own destiny. That is, he sins. The result of that self-determination is death. Death is the condition of separateness, since the creature, apart from his creator, does not have life. Physical death is clearly a part of this picture in the Hebrew Pauline understanding. Separation from the source of life results in decay and disintegration. Now, we've done some videos on this, so we'll break in Brauch's discussion here and take up part 2 next time. But I wanted to put a link into what we've already said about this definition of death as separation from God, and separation really in 3 stages. Our videos on it start with this one I'll put on the screen. Life and death in Genesis chapter 2. Who was telling the truth when God said, in the day you eat from this tree, you will surely die? According to the logic of the Watchtower and many others who believe that death is physical death, of course, that makes God the liar, and we can't have that. So what does the playlist, by the way, that is the first entry in a playlist entitled What JW.org is Not Telling You About Life and Death. Life and Death according to the Scriptures. So put that playlist link in. And also the first video, Life and Death in Genesis chapter 2. See you for part 2 of Brauch next time.